In the first semester of my sophomore year, I lived in a single dorm room. It was tucked away in the very corner of the floor, isolated, cut off from the main hallway by a small dead-end corridor. To reach my door, you had to turn the corner and walk through that narrow passage where there was never any movement. At first, I liked it. Silence, control, privacy. I could close the door, and the world disappeared. Until one evening, the silence answered back. I was studying for a biology exam. It was around 11 o'clock. The dorm was quiet, just the hum of the ventilation, distant footsteps, occasionally laughter from other rooms. Then I heard it. A barely audible knock. So faint that at first I thought I imagined it. Maybe it was the book, a page sliding on the desk. But no. Tap. I looked up. Tap, tap. I shouted. Come in. The door didn't open. Annoyed, I got up and yanked it open. The little corridor was empty. The light was cold, yellowish, no movement. I stepped to the corner, peeked into the main hallway, still empty. And then, for the first time, I felt something strange, not fear. A sensation that I was being examined. The next night, the knock was different. Not gentle. Persistent. Bam, bam, bam. I jumped out of bed. The clock read 1:17. Who's there? I yelled. The knocking stopped. The silence was so deep, I could hear my own breathing. I slowly approached the door and flung it open. Empty. But this time, there was a note on the floor. My biology notes. The exact sheet I had lost earlier in the library that day. I stood there, heart pounding. No one on my floor had access to my things. I hadn't told anyone I lost it. I went back to my room and locked the door. That night, I barely slept. On the third night, the knocking began even before I turned off the light. Slow, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. Tap, tap. Then I heard a whisper. Not words, just breathing, behind the door. My throat went dry. I flung the door open. Empty. But now, on the wall opposite my room, something new had appeared. Scratches. Long, crooked lines, as if someone had scraped the paint with something metallic. 3 vertical marks. Then 3 more. Then 3 more. I counted 9. That same night, I decided not to hide. When the knocking returned, I dashed into the corridor immediately. And I saw him. A back. Tall, thin, shrouded in darkness, moving unnaturally slow. He turned the corner at the end of the hallway. I ran. When I rounded the corner, the door at the end was closing. The bathroom. I charged inside. The light was off. I switched it on empty. Only the sound of water dripping from the tap. The stalls were locked. I knelt down and peeked under the first one, empty. Under the second, heavy black boots. Old, leather worn. I yanked open the stall. The boots were on the floor. Empty. No legs, no body. They were standing there, as if someone had just vanished out of them. And then I heard laughter. Deep, elderly, raspy. It wasn't coming from the stall. It was coming right behind me. I spun around. No one. But the light started flickering. And in the mirror, I saw movement. Behind me. A shadow. I turned again, nothing. When I looked back into the mirror, the shadow was closer. It was behind me. But I couldn't feel it. I screamed and ran. I locked myself in my room. Sat on the floor. The laughter didn't stop. Now it wasn't coming from the hallway. Not from the door. It was coming from the closet. Slowly. Raspy. I didn't want to go near it. But the knocking started from inside the closet. Tap, tap, tap. The same rhythm. I slowly opened the door. Inside were only my clothes. And on the back wall of the closet were scratches. 3 vertical lines. Then 3 more. Then 3 more. 9. I looked around. On the wall near my room's door, 3 more. 12. The next day, I spoke with the dorm supervisor. He looked at me strangely. He said my little corridor had been closed for 10 years. The doors were supposed to be sealed after an incident. What incident? I asked. He fell silent, then quietly said, "A man lived there, an older student. No one knew he was ill. They found him in the bathroom without his boots." I don't remember getting back to my room. I just sat and stared at the door. That night, the knocking wasn't from outside. It was from under my bed. Slow, persistent. I didn't look down. I just lay there, crying, as the laughter grew louder. A week later, I was transferred to another room. I never returned to that corridor. But sometimes, when I fall asleep, I wake up to a faint knocking. Not on the door, not on the wall, inside my head. Tap, and each time it comes closer. Because now I'm not sure the man was following me. I'm sure he was just waiting, until I started knocking back. I had been at university for 2 years. That October evening, my friends and I didn't have any plans. So me and 2 close friends decided to go to the nature reserve by the lake, a quiet, remote place where no one could find us. We brought some beer and lit a small fire on a hidden clearing. At first, the night felt easy. Jokes, laughter, the warmth of the fire. But the darkness around us seemed to thicken, and our laughter started sounding strained, wrong. Leaves crackled out of rhythm. Branches snapped where no one had stepped. I could feel we were being watched. At first, we thought it was just an animal. Then a large branch fell into the fire, scattering sparks. My friend jumped up, startled. And that's when we realized it wasn't a person. A shadow between the trees had no shape, but it moved, deliberately, as if it could feel our fear. We ran. The path back to the dorm became a maze. The forest seemed to shift around us. Trails disappeared, trees bent at impossible angles. Shadows followed us silently. Every sound we heard wasn't loud, but I felt it in my chest, like a heartbeat not my own. Suddenly, I felt a hard strike in my back. One friend fell and didn't get up. I turned and saw the shadow leap at him. A shapeless hand grabbed him and dragged him into the darkness. His scream vanished into the whispering of the trees. The last friend and I ran, hearts pounding, legs burning, but the feeling of being hunted never left. We reached the road leading to the dorm, thinking we had escaped. But the forest wasn't done. I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, branches swaying, shadows forming shapes that shouldn't exist. A faint whisper drifted through the air, calling my friend's name. We ignored it, but the sound grew louder, angrier, as if the forest itself was alive and mocking us. When we got to the dorm, I thought we were safe. The window of our room looked out at the forest. There, a figure moved, impossible to describe. Long, rigid arms, a head bent at a wrong angle, and eyes glowing with a cold, white light. We tried to barricade the door. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, knocking on the walls. The figure appeared, its movements jerky, unnatural, almost like it was bending reality itself. My friend tried to escape through the window. For a moment, I thought he could make it. But the darkness reached him, and I watched as his body merged with the shadow, vanishing into nothingness. Alone now, I could barely breathe. Every creak, every whisper felt like the forest inside the dorm. But then I noticed something new, footprints. They weren't human. Large, twisted, leaving marks in the dust of the hallway. And they led to my bed. I ran to my laptop, desperate, hoping light or noise could save me. The figure appeared in the screen's reflection, closer, almost tangible. It whispered my name, slow and deliberate. I slammed the laptop shut, but the whisper didn't stop. Morning didn't come, or maybe it did, but the dorm felt unchanged. Outside, the forest was silent, but I could still hear steps at night. The shadows lingered, creeping closer. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and see the faint glow of those eyes. The darkness breathes. The shadow waits. And I know, one day, it will come for me again. It was my first year at university, and I still don't know the exact moment when everything started breaking, reality or me. Noah appeared quietly, without emotion, without presence, as if he had simply been placed in the room. Our first handshake was cold, not physically cold, cold in feeling. His hand didn't squeeze mine, it just lay there in my palm. On the first night, I woke up and saw him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at me. "Sorry," he whispered. Back then, I thought he was just a strange roommate. But on the third night, I woke up earlier. He wasn't sitting anymore. He was standing, right next to my face. I could feel his breathing, slow, even. I didn't move. I pretended to be asleep. And then he whispered, "Do you hear it too?" I didn't know what it was. After that, the real horror began. My things started changing places. Messages on my laptop were opened. Search queries appeared in my browser history that I never made. How to tell if someone is watching you? Can two people share thoughts? How to know who is real? I thought it was him. But one day I checked the login activity and saw that my account had been accessed at 3:14 a.m. I checked the hallway security camera. It showed me leaving the room. At 3:13. I didn't remember doing that. I became afraid to fall asleep, because the dreams became too real. In my dreams, Noah didn't stay silent. He spoke normally, calmly. He explained that I was slowly disconnecting. "You think I'm the one going through your files?" he asked. "What if it's you?" I would wake up with the feeling that I had just understood something important, but it slipped away instantly. The climax came 2 weeks later. I walked into the room and saw photographs on my wall. Photos of me. Printed. Taken while I was asleep. Written across the top in marker with the words, "Watch yourself." I lost control. I screamed. I called the police. When they arrived, I shouted that it was Noah. That he was stalking me. That he was breaking my mind. The officer looked at me strangely. "You don't have a roommate," he said. "What?" "This room is assigned to you only." It felt like I had been punched. I pointed at the second bed. It was empty. No blanket. No belongings. No sign that anyone had ever lived there. "He lived here," I screamed. "Noah." The officer looked at me as if I was no longer part of the conversation. "Michael," he said slowly, "you were transferred last year because of an episode involving an imaginary roommate." I felt sick. They took me to the campus medical center. They said it was severe stress, sleep disturbance, dissociation. But that night, in the hospital room, I woke up. Someone was sitting on the edge of my bed. I was afraid to open my eyes. "Now you see," the familiar voice whispered. "I don't live in the room, I live in you." I opened my eyes. Empty. But my toothbrush was on the bedside table. I hadn't brought it. A month later, I was discharged. I live alone now, no roommates. But sometimes, when I look in the mirror, something feels wrong. My reflection sometimes blinks a little slower than I do. And when I fall asleep, I wake up sitting on the edge of my bed, staring into the darkness. Sometimes I hear myself whisper, "Sorry," and I'm no longer sure which one of us is saying it.